Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Care on Your Own Terms, Designing and Defining Your Journey. Thanks for joining us as we not only discuss the importance of self-love and care, but also break down those taboos surrounding the concept. I'm Bianca Rhule, New York City lead of BOLD at Verizon Media, BOLD standing for Black Organizers, Leaders, and Doers.
And I'm Tracey Exantus of the New York Times Black NYT member and self-care strategist. Now, this will not only be a discussion, but an immersive workshop for attendees in person and online. And we're not only just talking about dismantling our negative self-talk, but we're also being joined today by our panelists.
So to introduce them, we have the lovely Christmas Hutchinson, author of The Resilient Mind, The Field Guide to a Healthier Way of Life. And we also have the amazing Concepción de León, New York Times columnist, where she reviews self-help books, as well as the creator of Ella's Space column. Thanks for joining us, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get started, we're actually going to start with a little bit of an activity. So we're going to incorporate you guys here in the studio and you guys at home. What we're going to do is everyone's going to take the note card that's found on your seat. You're going to write down one of your goals that you hope to achieve or a negative thought that you hope to break. In the second portion of this, we're going to have you write down all the reasons why you think that you will not achieve said goal or the ways that you plan to break that negative habit. So we'll give you guys a few minutes here and at home for you guys to write down some of your thoughts.
Think deep, y'all. You got this.
Yeah, this is a therapy for you.
It's therapy. And for those at home, you can participate as well, so don't forget to do that.
So a lot of you are probably wondering, what are my actual goals? Let's just take a look at some of the questions that we have here, like what are your negative thoughts, but also what are the roots of that thought? So if you're thinking about, I'll give you an example of a goal. Let's say you want to build a website, but you don't know how to build a website. So the goal would be to build the website. And then the second thing would be saying, okay, I don't know how to build the website. I'm not good at doing these things. I just don't know. That could be the negative thought. So just go with that and see what you want to write that's pertaining to your individual life.
Yes, I see people really thinking about it.
Yeah, you guys look really deep. So we'll give you guys a couple more seconds here to write down a few things, and then we're going to jump into some other aspects of our show here for you. Okay, it seems like most of you guys are done writing.
Okay, so just remember, this is an immersive workshop. So though we have our guests here today who will be answering a lot of our questions that we have prepared, we also want you guys to engage as well. So though we'll ask them questions, we have an event runner here who'll be walking around with different mics. So definitely think of the answers to these questions because we'd love to hear from you all as well. So let's get to it, ladies. So as you can imagine, there are all these definitions of self-care. There are all these images of self-care. It's become a social platform phenomenon. So I can imagine a lot of individuals probably don't even know how to begin to think of the word of self-care. How would you ladies define it?
I'll let you go. Okay.
I think for me, self-care is really about self-compassion, and that's a hard-earned lesson. I definitely think that I'm someone who's like consistently poking at my life and my personality and being like, how can I do this better? What can I improve? And I think that's great and, can sort of propel you in terms of like propelling your career forward and helping you with self-growth, but I think it can also cause a lot of self-criticism, which has been the case for me. And so one thing that I have sort of been teaching myself is self-compassion and how self-care can mean not just the things that you do, so like meditation or like finding a good hobby, et cetera, but also the way that you talk to yourself and the way that you feel about your life and your approach to it. So I would say self-care equals self-compassion to me.
That's awesome. I like that definition. Mine is more where I feel like there's a component of self-love and then there's a component of self-care. And so what we do see these days is self-care is the bubble baths, the massages, the this, the that. But I like to take it a step back or take it to baseline, and that being self-love. and you loving yourself enough to create boundaries, you love yourself enough to have the compassion for yourself, and then you also care for yourself, meaning you rest, you increase your knowledge in certain activities or whatever you're interested in. So for me, it's more of a baseline of loving yourself, not letting people use you, not putting yourself in situations to get hurt or used. And when you do have self-love, you're able to love other people. And so when you do see people who act badly toward other people, it's not that they are acting badly toward you, it's that that's how they feel about themselves.
So in a market that's so oversaturated, like you said, so many different options for what we would consider self-care, how would you ladies kind of look at self-care for the individual? Like, how would you suggest for one to start a practice in self-care?
Well, I think
We can read your book.
For starters.
I do, in my book, I do have some quick exercises that you can do if you're just like, what do I do? But I think that that the first thing that you could do is start by reframing the things that you say about yourself, because you are amazing, you are valuable, you are a unique product of God. And so whatever anyone has said about you that is not true. So that's where you can start in terms of self-care. The other thing is start to say no to things that you don't want to do. A lot of us culturally feel obligated to do things that we don't want to do. We're obligated to marry people we don't want to marry. We're obligated to have majors in school that we don't want. But start, making decisions for yourself, and then start your journey of actual care, whether that is, taking an hour-long walk or whatever. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Whatever works for you. If it doesn't work, go on to the next thing.
So I don't know about y'all, but this is how I started my self-care journey. I bullet journal. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's essentially this really, seems really intense, but actually a pretty simple way of journaling and sort of keeping track of your life. So I opened my bullet journal and I, went to a blank page and I was like, this is gonna be my morning routine. And I wrote a list of like everything I wanted to do. I was like, I'm gonna meditate, I'm gonna read, I'm gonna write, I'm gonna do yoga, I'm gonna take, I don't know, it was like a 3-hour-long process where I would have had to wake up at like 5 a.m. to finish it. And you guys don't know me, I'm Concepción, I wake up at 8:30 a.m. Like that is my wake up time. And so I started off by sort of trying to transform my entire life. And I think that's something that it's so easy to fall into. You're like, I feel often like, I know how to do better. Like, why don't I just do better? I know I should meditate. I know I should work out. I know I should do this, this, and that, but I'm not doing it. And I think for me, it's because I've sort of taken on more than I can chew. I've been like, okay, the only way that it will count is if I right away start meditating for like 20 minutes. I mean, I don't know if you guys have tried meditating, but it's really hard to meditate even for like 2 minutes. And so for me, it was really taking a step back and realizing like, I don't have to meditate, for 20 minutes a day. I don't even have to meditate every day when I'm starting out, It's more so about taking things one step at a time. There is a self-help writer, his name is James Clear, and he has a book, I don't remember when it came out, but it's called Atomic Habits. And essentially it's this idea of like very small changes that you can make to change your behavior or to change your habits. And one of the things he talks about is something called cue routine. This isn't what he calls it, but it's essentially cue routine reward. He didn't invent this sort of method of tackling your habits, but it's like a psychological system, essentially, a psychology system, and it involves essentially, so let's say you want to go running in the morning, right? And you are having trouble doing that. One cue might be to put your sneakers next to your door, next to your bedroom door. Yeah. Then the routine is actually running, and then when you come back, maybe you give yourself like a small piece of chocolate or like whatever it is, like whatever would be a reward for you, right? And then eventually the idea is that you keep doing that, and eventually like the reward comes from the routine. And so I think looking at things like that and sort of taking it one step at a time. And like I said, James Clear's book is called Atomic Habits, and I'm not plugging it. I'm just saying it because I think atomic is a really good word for the way that we should form habits. And I think that it's really about consistency, less so than it is about overhauling your entire like life and self-care routine and taking it, let's say one day you meditate for 1 minute and then the next day you're like, okay, I'll do it for 2. And it doesn't have to be meditation, whatever works for you. But I would say like consistency and taking it really slow is very important.
And I think on top of that, before you go to the next question, is to forgive yourself when you make a mistake, because that's where we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up. Like, oh my God, I went 3 months doing keto and then I fell off and whatever, and you're just beating yourself up all day, and then you decide to just binge eat and just ruin everything and just go down that wrong path. But just forgiving yourself, like all of this is just an experiment and an experience, and you could just try again tomorrow. That's the great thing about life.
You gotta make sure you have a little grace for yourself.
Yeah, because Oprah said, don't look at failure as failure, look at it as redirection. Like maybe this isn't the thing that works for you, defining your version of self-care, but something else will. So trying out several different things also does work.
Right.
So.
And also kind of to play off of that self-love portion that you spoke about earlier, you know, as people of color, because this is geared towards people of color, we have this sense of feeling the need to always feel gracious about everything that we have, always making sure that we are staying humble in all that we receive. But it can sometimes be detrimental to, I guess, more so to say, speaking about our self-worth. You know, when we're looking at something like, oh, I do deserve that, or I don't deserve that. You speak to a portion in your book where you were passed up for a promotion, and immediately after that, you begin to focus on your inadequacies versus saying, no, I did deserve this regardless. So how do you feel as people of color, or as people in general, we can make sure that we're balancing humility, but at the same time making sure that we are affirming our self-worth and value?
Well, I think for me, what's helped me through that is having affirmations and actually legitimately saying those, like looking at myself in the mirror and like saying, you know, you are a good contributor at work. You are a lovable, you know, sister or aunt, and just having those affirmations and really. And I have like an exercise on this in my book as well, really like catching myself with the negative thoughts. You know how sometimes people will say, oh my God, girl, that outfit is cute. And you're like, oh, I got it from the thrift shop. you downplay the whole thing. And it's like, no, thank you. Thank you. I put this together yesterday. I'm actually proud of my skills. Yeah, I mean that's probably a little bit extra, but
we'll accept that from
but
you,
just
though.
being okay with taking praise and not falling into the habit or the thought process of diminishing like who you are. Like you are valuable.
Oh, the sugar honey iced tea.
Yes.
Which I think goes into like maybe our next question, which is unlearning behaviors that no longer serve us and relearning or reassessing how to create boundaries or how to combat that negative self-talk. Can you speak a little bit, either of you ladies, about how you would go about doing those things?
Can I go back to the last question really quickly?
Oh, sure.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, because it's something that I also really have struggled with, I really recommend looking at the evidence. So not getting stuck in your head and sort of looking at all the things, the conversations that you're essentially having with yourself about why you're not good enough or why you may or may not have been passed for a promotion, but actually looking at the evidence, asking for feedback, and if that feedback doesn't feel fair, like thinking through on your own, sort of like, you know, here's a list of my accomplishments, here are a list of the things that I've done, here's what I want to do, like how close am I to that? And really kind of taking a more, what's the word? I guess like practical approach or evidence-based approach to how you view yourself. And I would really recommend looking to other people, looking to your friends, looking to your family members, like ask them, you know, because often I don't think we get feedback about ourselves or like our work or who we are. And friends will typically be really happy to offer that to you. You know, if you can ask them like, what are 3 words that describe me? What's your, or you know, colleagues, you can ask them, what's your impression of me at work? What's the vibe that I give off? And you can get sort of different opinions, and then you can sort of be like, okay, well, like this feels true for me, or this doesn't feel true for me, and this is why. But I think getting stuck in your head is like such a dangerous cycle because it's often not evidence-based. You know, it's emotion-based.
I think our initial reaction is to kind of think about why what someone else has said is true about us. Yeah. And we don't think about the things that we think or know to be true about ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that does open up a level of vulnerability that we have to have with one another, with our friends, with our family, to ask those sorts of questions. So I absolutely agree with that.
And also thinking, like, if this person sees me in a particular way, but I disagree, what am I doing to give off that vibe? Or like, what am I doing to sort of to influence their opinion? And you know, and of course there are going to be people, I know we're going to get to this a little bit later, that are just toxic and that are just not for you and aren't here to really help you and are just giving you bad feedback. Those are people. But I think we sort of in our gut know the people that aren't like that and know the people to listen to, and I feel like those are the people that we should turn to.
Well, in those situations, then how would you describe or assess, how do you begin to set boundaries with those people? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's important to have boundaries, especially healthy boundaries, because not all boundaries are healthy. So if we're going to relearn and unlearn and go through this process several times over, how are we, or why is it more important to have those boundaries with people? Christmas, do you want to take this one?
The question is, why is it more important to have boundaries away from negative people? Or
why is it important to have boundaries in general?
Oh.
I mean,
well, I'm glad you asked. It's important to have boundaries with people because as humans, we are set up to infringe. That's what we do, and we teach people how to treat us. So sometimes I hear people like, I wish this person would stop doing this, and it's like, well, you've been letting them do it. Like, people know what they can do. I mean, obviously, most people know how to be social and know how to stay in their lane, but as humans, we infringe. You see it with kids all the time. They just push and push and push until they negotiate their way into whatever it is they need. And what happens is that when you start to let your boundaries down, and when people are not respecting your boundaries, it becomes an energy suck, number one. Number two, you come out of alignment with yourself, and so you start doing things that you don't want to do, and you start to resent yourself and resent them, and you just become angry because you're just like, I just want to be me. And I would just like challenge you guys in the audience to just think about those times where someone wanted you to do something that you did not want to do. And you could even go back to like when you were a kid, you probably were stomping and like, man, I really don't want to do this, and they want me to do it. Like even like homework, we didn't want to do that. I mean, that was out of alignment of what we wanted when we were kids. We wanted to play, you know? And then when we wanted to learn, we were excited about it. And so it just pushes you out of alignment with who you are, and that takes you down a whole different road of self-worth, of depression and anxiety, because you're starting to live for other people. I'm just going to stop there because I can go real deep.
I mean, while we're on the topic of toxic people, I mean, it can come in all forms of fashion. It could be someone that is a family member. It could be a friend who's been there, I don't know, for all of your life, through major moments in your life. How do you manage their presence? Because I know we live in a culture where we're easily able to say, hey, just cut that person off. Ooh.
I'll give Christmas a second to think about this.
Mull this one over.
I'll let you answer it. I have my whole thing about toxic people. You guys can read it in the book.
So last Christmas, short story. I have this aunt who would always ask me on Christmas Eve to go Christmas shopping for her. So she'd be like, oh, like, it's just, you're so good at this. Like, you can find the deals. I'm like, yeah, but it's not
guilting
easy.
You.
Right. Guilting me. And long story short, I did it. You know, I don't like saying no to people, especially not my family. So I did it. I went. I was like, I hated it. I didn't get to like my aunt's house, and we celebrate Christmas Eve. I didn't get to my aunt's house until like 8 or 9 p.m. because I was Christmas shopping, and that was such a like a moment for me. I was like, that's it. Never again. I'm never doing this again. I literally planned a trip around Christmas Eve so I wouldn't have to say no. I don't recommend this. I mean, you should just say no. But I wasn't ready to say no yet, so I like planned a trip around that time so I wouldn't be put into that situation again. But what I will say is don't let people make you feel bad for things that feel good to you. So for me, what I would have loved is to just sit at home on Christmas Eve, like hang out with my family, eat good food. Like I did not want to be Christmas shopping. I had already done my Christmas shopping, you know? And I think that often our family and our friends and anyone in your life, you know, everyone is sort of like gunning for themselves. Everyone wants a piece of you. And I think it's up to us to sort of set those boundaries. And I think those boundaries can look very different. You know, it can be about time. It can also be about money. Something that I have had to do is set up a separate sort of bank account for money that I'm willing to lend or give to other people, sort of depending on their needs. Because what I found myself doing was whenever someone asked me for money that I knew needed it, you know, generally people from my family, I would just be like, okay, here, because I didn't feel, I was like, if the money's in my account, I have no reason to say no, you know? But if you keep doing that, $40, $50, $60, it adds up, and eventually you have $0 in your account. So what I've done is sort of set up a literal boundary where I have a separate account and I'm like, this is my family account. And if someone asks me for money, I'll see how much I have available there. If they ask me for $500 and I only have $200, I'll be like, I have $200 available to give you right now, you know? And that was really hard for me, but it also relieved a lot of the stress of having to sort of feel like I was denying them something that I had. As I'm sure, you know, or I'm sure, but it could be the case that some of you are first generation, that some of you are sort of the first in your family to be in a position where you're able to even give back at all. That's my situation. And I feel like there's a lot of guilt involved in that. But I feel like setting up those physical and like personal boundaries is so important for like your own personal well-being and also for your financial well-being, you know, in the future.
Can you dig a little deeper in that? Like, let's get into maybe the intergenerational traumas, but let's look at it from a cultural lens. We're talking about first-generation American, which I am also first-generation American. I think the way that we're in two cultures submersed at the same time, how do you deal with that? And I mean, you ladies chime in as well. Like, how do we deal with that being women of color, and then women of color in America with a different cultural view?
Girl.
I was like, ooh,
we're going
that's
in.
a lot. I mean, it's really hard. I feel like what my experience has been is that my family came to this country and they sort of tried to retain a lot of what they experience in their countries. Part of what that means is that they live close to their families. Like my entire family lives within 2 houses of each other, you know? And that's a blessing, but also like very overwhelming when you're in that space. And so I think that like figuring out the ways in which your family triggers you and the ways in which your family is not beneficial to your growth is really important. I mean, obviously, that's something that I think people need to work out in therapy. Go to therapy, guys. It's great.
That's a plug.
Yeah. And work out in therapy. And that's something that I had to realize was like, I really, really sometimes feel like I don't want to be around my family because it's very stressful to me, and it's like it brings up a lot, you know, and a lot of that sort of trauma from my past and from my family's past comes into my life. And I would try to force it, you know? I'd be like, no, I have to go visit my dad, like every other day or every other week, whatever. Not every other week, that's not that often, but every other day or whatever. And I've sort of been giving myself permission to sort of take some space. Christmas and I were talking upstairs about a trip that I took to the Dominican Republic a few weeks ago in which I was with my family the whole time and wished that I was alone the whole time. And so I think it's sort of taking those family values and seeing how really precious that is, because it's great to be able to have your family and to be able to be close to your family and have that support system, but also understanding that you need to have the space to grow individually. And it's often hard to do that, I think, when you're really entrenched in your family.
So I do want to take it back to kind of that conversation we were talking about toxic individuals and kind of get at it from another angle. So how do you identify when you are the toxic individual, and how do you manage that?
I've been that person before.
We've all been that person.
Yes, we have. Yeah, but sometimes you just don't know. You start to know that you're that person when your energy is just always low. You find yourself like complaining like about things that you normally wouldn't complain about. It's like, oh my God, they were 2 minutes late with my coffee. Just like ridiculous things where just existing is completely annoying. Like everything around you just takes long, nothing is ever right. Like you're just completely just a cantankerous, like just, and that's when you are the toxic person. That's when every time someone calls you, they probably hang up after a few minutes because you unload on them about how horrible your life is. And it may take a while to get there and to get to that point where you recognize that. And so now I've started to recognize it. I remember I was on a project last year, and my client was the toxic person, and she made me toxic. And I was in this space where everyone's like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're so, like, they can even tell through text message. Something was just not right. And I was like, oh, this lady is having an impact on me. And so immediately I kicked it into gear. I think I wrote a blog about this where I started exercising, I started meditating, I kicked up my meditation. I kind of laxed on it and wasn't meditating as often, and so I started doing it in the morning and in the night every day. And I just started to, my mood started to change. And the thing about meditation that's so great about it is that it kind of resets your brain. And when you're like dealing with somebody jumping on your nerves day after day after day, and you're not resetting, it just pushes you deeper and deeper and deeper into that bad place. And so when I would meditate, her interactions with me would never bother me anymore because I was resetting every day.
I think that's very important to say too, though, because like it's important to be mindful. When you're practicing mindfulness, it's really just sitting with yourself and seeing how you feel around other people. When you're around certain people, is your energy low or is it high? And if you're around people who happen to make your energy really low, when you're like, okay, maybe I can't spend time with you today. Or when you are around those people, combating the negative thoughts also. When you're dealing with those particular toxic people. But let's talk about toxic masculinity.
Hello.
We talk about how that's problematic, but can we get into that a little bit? Can we talk about these toxic men and how they can use self-care to be better? Yes. Because
the men are not happy.
I mean, we're out here doing the work. No, because we're actively, I feel like Black women currently, at least in our society today, we're actively putting the work in to be the best versions of ourselves, to design and define what we stand for. So when are men going to do the same? Like, how can they utilize self-care, do you think, in your opinions, to help them get out of those toxic phases? Because it's not going to be the same as for women.
Well, we do have.
No. Does anybody in the audience want to answer?
Does anybody want to answer?
I'm like, we have some men in the audience.
We have men here, so.
Well, I don't think it's a.
Do you guys want to defend yourselves?
I think we have one. We have one.
Hello, stand up.
Hello,
please.
stand up. Say your name.
Say your name.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. My name is Nick. I'm out of Queens, New York. I'm a man, of course. Just kudos to you ladies, too. Everything that everybody's saying, I think is poignant. I think it's insightful. As far as toxic masculinity goes, I think nowadays it's getting more so used as a blanket statement, specifically for Black men. Now, this isn't to say that it doesn't exist, but I do believe that a lot of times the things that we do, the things that we go through get a little bit overlooked by society in general. That's not saying or taking away from anybody else who's getting overlooked, but just to hear something like what you just said, like that was completely blanketed on all men.
No.
It was. That was an automatic assumption that every man in here is toxic in some sort of way, and I don't believe that, and I don't think you believe that either.
No, absolutely not. I don't believe
but as far as toxic masculinity goes, I think a lot of brothers recently have been focused on self-care. Self-care is more than just, getting a shape up, getting your hair cut, keeping that beard clean. I think it's still very necessary.
Still necessary, yes.
I'm mad I didn't get one cut before I came in here, but I think self-care as a whole in the Black community has been getting a lot more light shed on it. I don't think it's just necessarily that males have to do it more so now. I think we are doing it, and I think we should continue doing it. But something like toxic masculinity, I think, is getting draped around and carried around a little bit too much. It's something that I don't feel like everybody has. I feel like actually everybody has been through some sort of toxic phase, whether it's masculine or feminine. Everybody up here just said that they were the toxic person at some point in their life. But when men do it, it has that term. Why is that?
Are you asking us?
Wow,
Yes,
that's a
the
whole
question.
other panel.
So when I talk about toxic masculinity, I mean it in the sense of we look at men, and men with the characteristics of what is considered to be a strong man, a lot of times tend to be the things that kind of pummel women at the end of it. Like, a lot of men think that they need to be the strong man who needs to be the leader of the household. But the way that some men take that is, you let me make all of the decisions. I'm not allowing you to do anything because I am the man. A lot of time that comes from a space of them feeling like they need to take that role. And I don't want men to think that that has to be their role. There is partnership. That's why you're in relation with another person. But I mean, in a single sense, for a man, men a lot of times think that going to therapy is if you're soft. But it's not. That's such a strength. And I want to talk about that sort of masculinity complex where we're looking at what are ways that we can give to men to elevate and not to be in a space where you feel like we're blanket statementing you, where we feel like all of you are one and the same. So I'm not viewing it as all men are toxic, but for the men who are currently in a toxic phase or have been in that phase or just simply want to excel, what resources are we giving you? What resources do you feel like you have? So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. Not necessarily like, you guys are all trash. We're not saying that. Some people are saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
I think, to be fair, we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to destigmatizing mental health when it comes to men in general, you know?
Yes.
I think that, like, men and women have a really hard time with going to therapy, with not seeing it as a sign of weakness. Like, I was just talking to a girlfriend, a woman who's a friend of mine the other day, who was telling me that, like, point blank, which I thought was really interesting because it's very self-aware. It's like, I see going to therapy as a sign of weakness, but it's hard for her to overcome that, you know? And I think in that way, men have it, like, twice as hard because there is this sort of historical precedent of men being viewed as the protector, as being viewed as the provider. And I think it is hard for people, for anyone. I mean, I don't want to speak for men, but my understanding is that it is really difficult for anyone to overcome that, particularly when the entire society is telling you that that's not your role, you know? I also, and men, correct me if I'm wrong, but my also impression of, like, male friendships versus friendships between women, they sort of develop in a different way, you know? I think women's friendships are more geared toward, like, talking and, like, sharing personal sort of tidbits around your life, whereas men's friendships are nurturing, right? Whereas men's friendships are more like, let's play ball together, let's do an activity, let's play video games, let's do an activity together. And I think a lot of those conversations, again, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think they have those conversations.
A lot of those conversations,
doors.
not that they don't happen, but it doesn't feel like that's the foundation of a lot of relationships. But please correct me.
Marquise got something to say.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Marquise from New Jersey. Shout out to Jersey. I just wanted to say, not all men are as basic as let's just get together and play ball. You know, we do have real conversations. But to your point, I was actually on a separate panel about is there a war on masculinity? And I kind of was like my brother back there. I kind of, jumped out the window and said, hey, like, there's not, we're not all bad, and whatnot. But I was informed, that can be seemed as kind of dismissive. If you know that you're not trash, that's good and well. But we do know there's this idea that there is a lot of toxicness going on for men of color. Whether you go on Instagram, Twitter, we know what happens at, parties and different things. And I think, just speaking for myself, one thing that I've just been trying to do is hold other men accountable. So to your point, even aside from playing ball, I do hold my fellow brothers accountable. I try to push people to do different things, set goals and whatnot. The reality is, yes, there is a sense of toxic masculinity, you know, and I think it's on individual people to do what they can to defy it and also just hold other people accountable.
Appreciate
Well
that.
said, well said.
Thank you. I'm like,
Can I say one more
Can we
thing?
snap? Of course, of course.
Sorry, guys. I'm obviously the expert on men. That's why I'm. No, I'm kidding. No, what I was gonna say was sort of separately when it comes to even having conversations with friends. One thing that I hear people say a lot is like, I don't need therapy. I have friends. Like, why would I need to go to therapy when I could just talk to my friends about all of my problems? And I think that going back to what you were saying, Christmas, about realizing when you're the toxic person, part of the toxicity, I think, is unloading all of our problems onto another person. Like, that's not another person's job. Because often in our individual problems, like, yeah, you could talk to your friends about one thing that happened today, but often wrapped up in that are patterns, are like historical traumas, are things that you're not working out, and they just keep coming up and you're not recognizing them because you're not talking to a professional, you know? And I think, and even not even just with therapy, I think there are a lot of times when we don't seek help when we need it. So for instance, like meditation, right? I talked to you guys earlier about how I could not get it together with meditation. Recently, I decided like, okay, I'm gonna take a meditation class. Like I'm gonna actually, this is something that's important to me. It's a habit that I wanna create, so I'm gonna start going to an actual meditation class. And so I think like seeking help when you're able to, and when you can afford it, of course, when it's within your budget, is really, really crucial, because otherwise we get into these patterns of not being able to form habits on our own, and then beating ourselves up for not being able to form those habits. But it's like, so what? If you can't do it, like get someone to help you, you know?
And for those of you who can't afford therapy or some of the resources that we're talking about here today, there are options. Like there are podcasts that you can follow that are catered towards the Black community, like Therapy for Black Girls, the Life Coach School. Like they sit with licensed professionals, and not to say that this is supposed to be used without the care of, but also just as another tool for you to get the help that you need, and not to be like, oh, you're crazy, because you're not. Like, we all have our things that we work on, and it's just easy when you have resources that, and some of us can't afford them. So it's easier to go through a podcast or search research online, a self-help book, Christmas's book. Like, a lot of these books have really great exercises and terms, and it'll give you vocabulary to define what it is that you feel, the things that you're going through. Like, it's not always gonna cost you even $50. Like, these things can be free. So self-care is obtainable. It's there.
It's there. The resources are there.
Yeah, you would be. It's interesting because it's easy just to go on Google and just Google search anything like people pleasing or just anything, because there are other people out there, and usually Google has that whole algorithm where you can see what other people are looking at. Mm-hmm. But you'll see that other people have asked about it, and I'm pretty sure that it's something that's been written about. And the last point you made, Concepcion, about getting help, that's one of the tools in my book. And it's like, we are not meant to do life by ourselves, period. There's nothing new under the sun. Somebody has gone through it. It may be 2019 that you're going through it, but someone may have gone through it in 2000 or 1953. But the life experience does not change. We just have technology and stuff right now. And so you just have to ask for help. Like, one of the things that I kind of resent my family about is everyone was so excited for me to get married, and rah, 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 you're making a life accomplishment and all this. And then when but didn't tell me what it really was. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. And then when it started to, make its way to where it isn't anymore, I was just like, wow, nobody has anything to say about this. Mm-hmm. And then you find out, oh yeah, I was having problems with this person. And it's like, well, how come you never?
You when I needed that.
Yeah, like, I'm in the name of keeping it real, so like, don't ask me about anything if you want the real deal. But most people just like gloss things over, so you have to be able to go and do that research and ask the people like real questions about what it is that you want to know.
Like, Black women, I think for a lot of women of color, we put on this face of, we don't have time for a breakdown. We don't have time. We got so much going on. But when we need that time, it doesn't wait for us. It just drops.
It just happens when it rains.
It just drops. Yeah. But it's like, I think we're also taught, like we said earlier, not to cause a ruckus, not to ruffle feathers. So I think a lot of what we've been taught how to handle these things, where now we're having to relearn how to move through them in an effective way that not only helps you communicate better your thoughts and your positioning, so now you're more assertive, but now you're also teaching people how to treat you in accordance to your manifesto.
But then it also goes back to the concept of making sure that you know who's in your circle. Not just choosing anyone because it looks great on Instagram or because we do this but also making sure that you have people in your circle who are very honest, who are very true, who can give you that real, just like Christmas over here, letting us know what's real and what's not. I also want to kind of switch gears a little bit out and talk about the millennial burnout. We are in a generation of being booked and busy, but we've somehow, some way romanticized that concept. So how do you say we combat that without feeling guilty?
Well, I guess you have to go to the root of why you think it is you are guilty for that. I know for me, I used to be the queen of being busy. Like I'm like team no sleep, all the stupid stuff that you see online. And I started to realize that all the things that I was doing was bearing like the most little bit of fruit that ever happened for me ever to bear. And I started to realize that I was always tired, and I'm like, why? And I just started to take a look, and you guys can see this in my book. I think it's called Protect Your Time. I started to, number one, realize that time is more important than money. At least it is to me. Because I can always make more money. I can never get minutes back, ever. And so when I started realizing, and so I didn't mention this to you guys, but I'm a cancer survivor. And so when I looked at time differently when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I started to be like, okay, well, if I were not to be here tomorrow, is this what I want to be doing with my time? No. So when you're like, I've had the unfortunate and fortunate experience of having that. So now I look at time differently. And so when it comes to protecting your time and drawing boundaries around that, you just have to just think to yourself, is this something that I would be proud of doing next year? If I were 80 years old and I was spending my time doing that now, would I be proud of that when I'm 80? I mean, I literally go through these things. It sounds crazy, but I do go through these thought processes of, is this really what I want to be spending my time on? And if it isn't, I have no problem now saying no, because you're the one at the end of the day that's going to be upset with yourself. No one's going to care that you gave them their time. I mean, they're going to be happy they gave it to you, but you gave it to them, but they're not going to care when you're hurt.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really great point. One thing that I will say, I actually forgot the original question, but I had this thing in my mind, so hopefully it relates.
Okay. I got millennial burnout.
Millennial burnout. Okay. I realized last year that I barely use any of my sick days. I use like one sick day maybe all year. I have a very strong immune system. I don't really get like sick in terms of like not having to go into the office sick, thankfully. But that means that like a lot of my mental sort of near mental breakdowns, I still was in the office, because I was like, well, I don't feel sick, I don't have a cough. I don't have to be at the hospital, whatever it is. And don't tell my boss, guys, but I'm scheduling my sick days this year. Like, I have one on the books for March where I'm like, I'm going to take it as a mental health day, because I feel like, we only think of the body as something that we need to take care of, and we don't think of our minds as something that we need to take care of. And I think that when we get really overwhelmed, like, take a day off. That's what they're for. I mean, if you have them, then take them off, because I think if you do schedule them in advance, which is what I've started to do just to make myself take them, if you do that, then like you have something to look forward to, But I think scheduling sick days, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying, or not to what I was saying, to another thing I was thinking about, which is giving yourself really a lot of silence, like giving yourself space to be by yourself and think and reflect and sort of like take a step back. I think with like phones and the internet and social media, like often you just have so many other people and other influences bombarding you, and you don't really have time to step back and think like, what what is this? Why is this important to me? You know, why am I on Instagram scrolling through Instagram? Like I used to scroll through Instagram for like an hour and a half or more.
I was like, that's it?
Yeah.
All the time. Still like that.
And
low-key.
I started deleting the app off my phone. I mean, I didn't delete my account or anything, but I started deleting the app off my phone for a little bit. Like when I just got back from DR, I deleted it. It's been like maybe 2 weeks and I haven't logged back on. And it's really nice because I realized I was scrolling and I was sad because I was looking at everybody else's life and I'm like, oh my God, like
Comparing.
why don't I have a book? Why don't I have a tour? Like whatever it is, stuff that I didn't even want. Like things you start wanting
Things that
things
you don't even know if they
want.
actually have, right? Because it's all a mirage at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's also important to like curate like what you're looking at on your Instagram feed. Because for me, I had to go through and do like a friend inventory of like, oh, you can't be here anymore. You gotta go. Oh, all you post is this person ain't this and that person is beep. I'm like, you can go
Unfollow.
too. Like it really goes through taking some of your friends off and just saying, this doesn't serve me any longer.
And being unapologetic about that.
Bye.
You know.
Yeah.
Bye, friend. I'll see you when.
And then also moving forward too, because there's all these different self-care hashtags as well. I'm sure everyone knows living my best life. I was talking to Christmas and Concepcion about that concept. Christmas is not a fan.
At all.
And I would love to speak a little bit more about that phrase and why you're not a fan, Christmas.
I just think that living my best life, people are thinking of it as going on trips and drinking rosé and turning up. And that's running yourself down. Like, that is not living your best life. Living your best life is creating a more peaceful life, creating peace of mind, creating a life where you're in full alignment with yourself and you're happy. Like, a lot of them people living their best life are miserable. They're broke. They are their credit cards are maxed out.
'Cause they're living
I'm from
their
Los
best life.
Angeles. I'm from Los Angeles,
balling
so I
out.
know. Yes. So that's why I'm not a fan of it, because I just think that it's fake and it's actually really stressful to live your best life the way they think they're living their best life.
That is so real. Because literally I was talking, a couple years ago, I was talking to some friends and I was like, oh my God, you guys are always traveling. Like, I feel so bad. I'm like, I can't afford it, whatever. And they admitted to me that they were in like thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. And I was like, wow, that I was shocked, honestly, because I just figured like they were just making it work. You know, they just figured out the hacks, the life hacks, whatever it is, to like figure out how to travel cheaply. But they were like in debt. And I think not knowing people's reality, like that's a really big thing. I totally agree with that. I had friends invite me to Yacht Week. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And before I could think about it, I was like, yes, I'm going. Opportunity of a lifetime. Sounds amazing. And I sat back and I thought about it and I'm like, why am I going on this trip? I can't swim. I'm already getting anxiety because like we're gonna be in the ocean. Like,
I was doing it for Insta.
right. Literally, I was like, I was just doing it for light. Like, I was literally just like, oh, I'm gonna look great on that yacht.
Ooh, those
like,
lights just feed
I can
your
just
soul.
see that Instagram feed, and I backed out. I was like, no, actually, I'm gonna pass. You know,
That's your self-care right there. You said
that was
no.
my self-care, and I don't feel guilty about it because I took time to myself. I like took sort of moments of silence, and I realized that financial security is very, very important to me. Saving up is very, very important to me, and that's personally for me, right? Like, that's not the case for everyone. You kind of have to, I'm a big believer in like seeing what's occupying your thoughts and going from there. So if you feel like the thing that's occupying your thoughts is like your relationship with your mom and your dad, try to work on that. If you feel like the thing that's occupying your thoughts is like money and money habits, try to work on that. For me, like, that was my thing. I was like, I need to save up money. I need to whatever. And that comes from a certain, I mean, I'm working on that in therapy too, because obviously that comes from a certain amount of like growing up without money, you know, having a fear of financial insecurity. But it felt good to me to sort of take care of that part of my life. So that's my advice.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this discussion real quick. We're going to get to you guys, so don't look at me like, oh, yeah, we're out of here.
You're like, oh, okay, no.
You know. So remember that activity that we had started with earlier today? Tracey's going to lead you on with that because we want you all to come up to the mic and share a little bit about yourselves, but also how we can reframe a lot of those negative thoughts that you all are having. And for those online, we also want you to participate, so make sure you do so.
So a lot of what we talked about in the beginning was writing down what your goals are, or a goal, or what your negative thought that you'd love to combat is. So if we're looking at the things that we want to be doing and we're figuring out why we're setting ourselves up to not do it, a lot of the times we're setting ourselves up for failures because we're saying, I can't do it, I don't know how to do it, so you don't do it. Does anybody want to share what their goal was and how they're now going to reframe that? You would like to share?
Yes.
So over the weekend, I was with some friends and we were having this great conversation about, different paths that we're all taking. And one of the things I said, oh my God, I have all this information. I feel like I should write a book about this because people encounter like so many roadblocks about when they're going to start a business. So I started my own business and I found out that a lot of the information is not given to you up front. So you find out as you're moving through the path and you're like, I wish they would have said that. And I read all these books and you read all this information and they omit so much because they want you to pay for you to get the rest of the information. So my friend is saying, oh, so start a book. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. You got to edit, you got to do all these things. He goes, just write a page at a time. So I wrote the first page. And I'm thinking,
Yes. Good for you.
Someone else want
anybody
to share?
Don't act like y'all are shy
Oh,
now.
no.
Y'all wasn't shy before.
We said it was immersive. Y'all saw the invite.
Well, I was saying Bianca should share hers, but my goal for this year is just to get a national recognition from a journalism or a story that I produce. So I'm a producer and reporter at my day job. So just want to keep elevating and keep improving.
What do you tell yourself about that? Are you like, I can do this? Or are you finding all the things that you're like, oh, okay, that means I have to submit to a amount of places?
Honestly, I would like to say I would have a positive outlook on life in general. Like people say, how am I doing? I'm really just blessed. And I would say for me, it's just trying to be better, today better than yesterday. And I realized I started trying to please my boss, or I started trying to please someone else, and to a lot of your points, it kind of just put me down. And then when I realized, I believe in God, so whenever I do anything, I just want to do it to please Him and then make myself happy. And then I realized how much happier I was, and no matter what anyone says, I know I'm proud of it, and I know I'm making God happy. So sorry. Voice cracked it. But yeah. So I try to make God happy. No, I'm good. And it's all gonna be good. So I'm gonna make that happen this year for sure.
You will make that happen.
Yeah.
You said it. You're manifesting it.
There you go.
Good for you. So I think a lot of us, we get caught up with getting from point A to B. So we think of, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. And we're like, I don't know the in-between spaces of how to get there. But like a lot of times it's literally taking that first step, because then the next step will reveal itself within that step, and so forth.
Because you end up being your own roadblock, essentially.
Yes. So did you want to share as well?
Yes, I will
please
share.
do.
So I actually, a couple of months ago, had a life coach. And so we were doing like a bartering situation. So I'm a photographer, and she was like, I need some headshots. And I was like, okay, great, I'll help you out. And so I ended up taking on too much, right, from her. And then she helped me notice that my thing was that I actually didn't think that I was enough. Just not good enough, just not enough for myself, for people, for whoever was coming into my life, whatever I was doing in my life. And that was like a huge roadblock for me. So that's my negative thought. So going back to this story, I took on so much from her to the point where I actually had to drop her as my life coach, because she was asking for too much from me. And I was saying yes to everything. She was like, can you help me with this? Can you actually do my website? And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever, like so easy.
Whatever you need.
Whatever you need. And then I realized that I was actually just bad at managing my time and saying no to people. And so that is my goal for this year, is to just manage my time better and to just say no and to really view myself as enough. So that's just my overall goal this year, is to pay attention to me, because I am very important.
You deserve it, too.
Self-worth, absolutely.
Take one more.
Do we have one more person who would love to share? Pardon? We do.
Hi.
Can you stand up?
Yeah, sure.
Tell us your name.
Okay. Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm from New York and New Jersey.
Duality. Okay.
That's
we like
right.
It.
Yeah. So my thing is, I want to start a podcast, or at least just like start working through things, maybe research or like whatever, of things that interest me. And so that's something that I want to do. And I've been talking about it for 2 years, and I've been starting and stopping it for 2 years, or maybe more. Yeah. So I guess I just want to do like maybe 3 things towards actually doing it. Like, yeah.
What do you think your blocker is?
Like,
why do you stop and
why am I
going back?
stopping?
Yeah.
You've been doing this for 2 years. What is that thing that's like? Is there some sort of fear?
Like, I don't know. It's sometimes you can just talk about something that you really want to do, but actually doing those tasks, which I guess I'm not actually saying why I'm not doing it.
Are you avoiding actually doing it?
I guess, yeah. I guess
it?
I'm avoiding doing it. I think it's like, what if I don't finish? Is it a waste of my time? What if I'm disappointed? I think that's what it is.
If you're being true to what you want to do and it's authentic to you, it cannot be wrong.
Okay.
It can't be wrong because this is who you are, how you're presenting yourself to the world. How is that inaccurate? It has to be for you and not for us.
Yeah, true.
I think also it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you're not actually doing it for like an organization or anything like that yet. Is that right?
No, yeah, no.
So really the stakes are low, right?
That's
so
true.
you have time. It sounds to me like also you have a sort of a fear of failure, which I can really, really relate to.
We all do.
Really, really,
Yeah, I'm
really,
definitely
really
perfectionist.
So you should see it sort of as a blessing that you don't have like a boss that you have to respond to. You don't have someone that's actually holding you accountable right now except yourself. And so what you need to look at, is sort of be like, why? First of all, think about whether you actually want to do it, right? Because sometimes we have kind of visions of things that we want to do, and then we actually do it, and we're like, actually, I don't really like this. It's not actually fun. Like, and that's
also
fair.
okay.
And that's, say it again.
And it's also okay, because I feel like when
Right.
people do that, they just feel all of a sudden guilty because they decided not to stick with what they thought
Right.
they wanted.
You
Again,
said
not a
something
failure,
that you're a
redirection.
perfectionist. You should reframe that. Procrastination is perfection dressed up as progress. So I think I said that right. Perfection is procrastination dressed up as progress.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're trying to perfect something, you're really not wanting to put it out. And there's nothing ever perfect. Like, we all have iPhones or Samsung phones. They did not come out with the 10 first. So you have to learn from your mistakes. And I've been there before. I stopped doing my website for a whole year because I wanted it perfect, and I didn't know how to make it perfect. So then I paid somebody to do it. But when you say that you're a perfectionist, it's just really something in there blocking you from wanting it just to be like this hit when you have to just go through the progress or the process. Fall in love with the process. The process of just failing and figuring it out and just doing your own way. And like she said, the stakes are low.
I think part of it more so is like when you have a creative thought and you have something inside of you that you want to share, you think is important, you also don't know how to dress it either. Like, is it a podcast? Is it a book? Is it a this? Is it a that? And I think, to your point, part of figuring that out is doing something. Right. Saying, I don't like this, or I maybe like it just enough to be a small, just creating. So, yeah.
I'm also a really big believer, because I'm also a perfectionist, in taking classes or in taking courses. If there's something that you want to do and you feel like you're not doing it at the level that you want to do it yet, and I'm not saying that you're not, because obviously I don't know, your podcast, but if it's an issue of you feeling like you want the quality to be better, or you feel like you're stumbling over your words a lot, whatever it is, you should take a podcasting class, and then you can come out of it with more confidence. Because often, And even if you don't do it, like, you've gained that confidence, you know? I think that's really valuable, and sort of feeling, because often, it's sad to say, but often we do, actually not sad. I was gonna say it's sad to say that we often seek that external validation, but I also think that there's like real value in learning a skill and in actually taking a class and taking yourself seriously and investing in yourself in this thing that you wanna do. So if you feel like it's that's holding you back, this sort of, well, two things. One, you're saying you're not sure how it should live. In that case, you could just try different things, you know, and see what sticks. And once you do find the thing, just take a class and get better at it. And then the product will be better as well.
Or even YouTube. YouTube University has everything.
Google has it all.
Anything on the internet. So,
Thank you.
Yes.
thank you.
We really appreciate you all for just being vulnerable with us. That's the first step, first of all. Also, for those at home, I know you probably weren't able to engage with us, but totally take this time to use this as a step of vulnerability. Call your friends and let them know how you felt about that. Get them to participate in the activity. So with that being said, before we wrap off, we wanted to leave you all with a few takeaways that Christmas is going to read for some of you all.
Avoid negative self-talk. Be selective on who you keep in your squad. We didn't really go into detail, but just keep the toxic
non-toxic people.
Keep them out your
Keep them out of your life. And if you want to start a podcast, or if you want to lose weight, or if you want to eat better, bring those people into your squad. Not the people who are like, let's go eat trash. Let's go waste our time popping bottles. And establish boundaries to protect your time and remove toxic people out. Also, recognize when you are the toxic person. And you make sure you do you and be you so that you can stay in alignment with yourself.
All of these are really great ways to hold ourselves accountable, to kind of grow and be better versions of ourselves, which is what we talk about in designing and defining what our lives look like from here on forward. So for those of you at home, we thank you guys for joining us. We thank you guys here for joining us. But also, one last thing for me anyway, you guys can purchase Christmas's book on Amazon, The Resilient Mind. And I believe you're selling a few of them after the show, correct?
Yes, I do have some available for purchase if you're interested in my tips.
Also, we want to make sure we want to hold everyone accountable today. So if you can pull your phones out and set a reminder, I'm looking at y'all. And for those who are watching on the internet, we would love you to do this as well. Put in an affirmation and set it for 10 a.m. tomorrow. It could be, I am worthy, I am in control, something along those lines.
You can also have it set so that it goes off every day.
Every single day, yes.
So that every day you're reminded,
and you
like,
can do that
slay the game,
in your alarm.
do your best, however, whatever it is that suits.
Whatever personal label you want, just put it right in your alarm every Tuesday or every day.
Awesome.
Okay. Just so that you guys know, also, we're hosting a reception afterwards upstairs. You guys are all more than welcome to join us. We would love.
Thank you to
yes.
our amazing guest, Concepción. You can find our work on
guys.
nytimes.com.
Yes.
Continue to follow them, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you guys.